There are moments in sports that disappear before the final buzzer. This wasn't one of them. The game moved on. The score changed. The highlights kept coming. But one small exchange stayed behind and somehow became bigger than everything around it. Not the final possession. Not the stat line. Not even the result. A player walked toward an official and asked a question. The answer came back. And for a second, the reaction felt almost too small to become a headline. Until people started replaying it. Then replaying it again. And suddenly the conversation wasn't about basketball anymore. Because what people thought they saw depended entirely on what they already believed. Some people watched the moment and saw normal competition. Emotion. Frustration. A player reacting inside a fast game. Others looked at the exact same sequence and saw something completely different. Not the reaction. The response to it. And once that idea entered the conversation, the moment started expanding. One clip became 10. One explanation became 3. People slowed footage down. Compared reactions. Started connecting this moment to earlier moments. Not because everyone agreed. Because nobody did. That's what made this feel unusual. The discussion kept changing shape. First it was about one call. Then expectations. Then standards. Then pressure. Then something bigger that had nothing to do with a scoreboard. Meanwhile, the game itself had already ended. Players moved on. The season kept moving. But the conversation didn't. Because sometimes a sports moment becomes larger than the play itself. And once that happens, people stop asking what happened. They start asking why this felt different. And people weren't debating the same thing anymore. The moment itself was simple. At least on the surface. A technical foul. A reaction. A brief exchange. Under normal circumstances, it probably would have disappeared into the background of a long season. But that isn't what happened. Instead, the reaction grew. And the reason it grew had less to do with the moment itself and more to do with what people brought into it. Some viewers saw a competitor showing emotion. Nothing unusual. Basketball has always been a game of visible reactions. Players celebrate big shots. They disagree with calls. They throw their hands up. They clap. They show frustration. The emotional side of competition has never been completely separate from the game itself. From that perspective, this felt ordinary. Just another emotional moment inside a high-pressure environment. Others focused on something different. Not the reaction. The standard. If one action leads to a whistle, should that same standard apply everywhere? That question started appearing almost immediately. Not because everyone agreed on the answer. Because consistency is one of the things sports fans care about most. People can accept difficult calls. People can even accept calls they disagree with. What becomes harder to accept is the feeling that similar moments are being judged differently. And once that idea entered the discussion, the focus started moving away from the play itself. The conversation became less about what happened in those few seconds and more about what those seconds represented. That's where interpretation entered the picture. Some viewers believed the reaction was completely justified. Others felt the situation was being exaggerated because of who was involved. And that's an important detail. The same moment can look very different depending on the expectations surrounding the player at the center of it. A routine incident rarely stays routine when attention is already elevated. But attention moved somewhere else. People started discussing visibility, pressure, expectations, the way certain moments seem to carry more weight than others. And once the conversation reached that point, the technical foul itself was no longer the entire story. That's where this stopped feeling like one technical. At a certain point, the conversation stopped being about the whistle. Not all at once. Quietly. Almost without people noticing. The discussion quietly changed. At first, the attention stayed where moments like this usually stay. On the player. Was the reaction too emotional? Was it understandable? Was this ordinary competition being interpreted differently? But that phase didn't last very long, because another question started showing up. What happens when a player feels like they have to carry the emotional side of the moment alone? That shifted attention, not toward blame, toward expectations. People stopped asking whether the reaction was acceptable, and started asking what support is supposed to look like in situations like this. Support from coaches, support from teammates, support from the systems around high-profile athletes. And that's where opinions started separating. Some viewers expect coaches to protect momentum, to challenge moments, to absorb pressure, to make visible statements when emotions rise. Others expect restraint. Stay composed. Keep the group focused. Trust that one moment shouldn't become bigger than the game. Neither expectation is unusual, but they create very different reactions to the same situation. And the bigger the spotlight becomes, the harder those expectations become to balance. Because visibility changes how people interpret silence. A calm response can look composed to one audience and disconnected to another. At the same time, expectations for stars work differently too. Visible athletes are often expected to perform, lead emotionally, stay composed, represent the team, and absorb pressure publicly, all at once. That creates tension, not because anyone necessarily failed, but because expectations rarely stay fixed when attention grows. And once those expectations become part of the conversation, every reaction starts carrying more meaning than intended. People stopped watching only for the outcome, and started watching for what moments seem to reveal. Because once expectations change, moments feel different. By this point, the discussion had moved far beyond whether one call was correct. Because once people attach meaning to a moment, they usually start debating something underneath it. And that's where the conversation became more interesting. One interpretation was that visible emotion is part of competition, not an exception, not a problem, part of what makes sports feel alive. From that perspective, reactions are not separate from performance. Frustration, intensity, body language, emotional swings, those things are often seen as evidence that the moment matters. People who viewed it this way weren't necessarily defending every reaction. They were asking something else. How much emotion should competition allow before it becomes something officials step into? Another reaction was almost the opposite. Competition can be emotional, but standards only work if they feel predictable. This view wasn't centered on one player. It was centered on consistency. If emotional expression crosses a line, then the expectation becomes that the line should look similar every night, for every team, in every arena. From that perspective, the discussion wasn't about whether emotion belongs in sports. It was about whether the boundaries around it feel clear. And that's where people started separating again. Because there was a third idea emerging. Maybe moments like this don't actually change. Maybe attention changes. A reaction that would normally disappear can suddenly feel important when cameras stay longer, clips spread faster, and audiences arrive carrying expectations before the game even starts. Visibility changes interpretation. The more people watch, the more meaning they attach. The more meaning they attach, the more every decision starts feeling symbolic. Not because every moment truly is, but because attention has a way of making ordinary moments feel larger than themselves. Which leaves a difficult question behind. Were people reacting to the moment? Or reacting to everything they believed the moment represented? And that's when the discussion became harder to simplify. At this point, the discussion wasn't moving because everyone agreed. It was moving because people cared. And that difference matters. Sports moments rarely grow because of the moment alone. They grow because people attach meaning to them. For some fans, this became a conversation about investment. Not investment in a scoreboard. Investment in attention, time, expectation. People follow teams for years, defend players publicly, argue about decisions, build routines around games, and slowly begin feeling connected to what they're watching. When that happens, reactions become stronger. Moments stop feeling isolated. One sequence starts carrying memories of previous ones. One decision starts feeling connected to bigger questions. That doesn't mean every concern is automatically correct, but it explains why reactions become emotional. To others, the discussion reflected something different. Pressure. Not only pressure on teams, pressure on visible athletes. The more attention a player receives, the more people begin expecting that player to represent multiple things at once. Performance, leadership, growth, emotion, professionalism. The challenge is that those expectations often pull in opposite directions. Be competitive, but don't appear frustrated. Be expressive, but remain controlled. Lead emotionally, but never let emotion become the story. That balance becomes harder the more visible the moment becomes. And maybe that's why reactions started extending beyond the game itself. Because people weren't only watching a basketball sequence anymore. They were interpreting what they believed it said about expectations, about attention, about how sports change when more people begin watching. The moment became symbolic, not because everyone agreed on its meaning, but because different audiences saw different meanings inside the same few seconds. By then, the original play wasn't carrying the conversation anymore. The conversation had already moved beyond the whistle. By the end of it all, the game still counted the same. The standings moved. The schedule kept going. Another matchup appeared. Another story arrived. That's usually how sports work. Moments happen. People react. Then attention moves on. But every now and then, something stays longer than expected. Not because the moment itself was larger, because people decided it meant something larger. And that's what made this different. Not universal agreement. Not one side winning the argument. Not everyone seeing the same thing. Just a moment that created more questions than answers. Some people watched and saw normal competition being interpreted too heavily. Others saw expectations colliding with visibility. Others thought the reaction revealed something about how audiences respond when attention reaches another level. None of those readings fully cancel the others out. And maybe they were never supposed to. Because sports conversations rarely stay inside the lines. A single exchange becomes discussion. Discussion becomes interpretation. Interpretation becomes identity. And once that happens, the original moment almost stops belonging to itself. The game moves on. But people remember how moments made them feel. Maybe that's why people kept replaying the moment. Not because of what happened, but because of what they thought it revealed. And by the time everyone finished debating what it meant, the original moment had already passed. One moment ended. The conversation continued.